Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. We are so elated to have you in our presence this morning to stand in front of you with this initiative that we are asking the City Council to help us move forward. The buyback program is a program that is voluntary, so we are not asking anyone to give up their Second Amendment rights, as I am also a licensed and concealed weapon carrier. During the time of my life, I've had issues where I've learned how to use a weapon properly during my military training, but I've also had an incident where weapons were used against me in order to try and attempt to take my life. At the time, the weapon that was used was my own personal weapon that was used against me. I have decided that taking a step forward along with my colleagues in this initiative to have the buyback program is one that can make a true difference in the lives of many. As this is a voluntary program, we are asking those that are willing to take a step forward to do so. If you are in the rights to have and operate a weapon or a gun, then this initiative is something that is truly for those that want to get rid of the weapons within their home if they're broken, but most importantly, if you have high caliber weapons that you are looking to make sure they are disposed of properly. In hopes of having this initiative, we're looking to take the weapons that we receive, melt them down, and create some form of image that we can use to honor those that we have lost to gun violence as we continue to push forward in the notion of making sure that our world is one of the best ones to live in for generations to come. I would like to now introduce the co-signer of the CCR for the buyback program, Councilman John Courage.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Again, I'm John Courage. I'm City Councilman for District 9. But I've always told people when I've offered myself for office, I may be a councilman for one district, but the decisions we make at City Hall affect the lives of everybody in this community. So today I'm speaking as a councilman for all of San Antonio when we ask people to consider, do you have weapons in your home that you no longer need or that you're afraid could be used for nefarious purposes or to endanger other people in your family or in your community? And if you do, this is your opportunity to go ahead and bring those to the city and let us dispose of them properly. But at the same time, this is a gun buyback program, so you'll be rewarded for that good citizenship move that you make. You know, there are just thousands of people who are dying from gun violence every year, and it happens everywhere. Most recently, we saw it right here in Texas, in El Paso, but we've also seen it just 35 miles south of San Antonio. We've seen it in Santa Fe, Texas, and it goes all over the country. And there are simply more weapons out there than people need for their personal protection or for hunting or for target shooting. And too many times those weapons are falling into the hands of people who have either psychological issues, maybe they're depressed. We've got thousands of veterans killing themselves with handguns every year. Or maybe it's a child who finds a gun in a home and thinks it's a toy. Or maybe it's somebody who does want to commit a criminal activity. There's a lot of reasons why guns are used outside of personal protection and for recreational purposes. And those are the ones that we want to try and get off the street. If we can keep guns out of the hands of criminals, great. But if we can keep them out of the hands of children, if we can keep them out of the hands of people committing domestic violence, if we can keep them out of the hands of people who are thinking about suicide, then we can save lives right here in San Antonio. And that's what this is about. This is not about taking people's rights away according to the Second Amendment. This is about public safety. This is about safety in our schools, in our businesses, in our homes, because we know this is where a lot of these terrible occurrences are taking place. I'm proud to stand here today and work towards this. You know, 89% of deaths that occur by gun violence at home affect so many families, and they affect children. I have grandchildren. I want them to feel safe, whether they're going to school or if they're in the home of a friend or a relative. And I think all of us agree with that. So we think this is an excellent way to step up and offer support and protection for the people in our community who know that there are just too many guns out there. So thank you for coming out, and now we're going to hear from one of our other fellow council people, Councilwoman Ana Sandoval.
Good morning, everybody. I want to thank Councilwoman Andrew Sullivan and Councilman John Courage for their leadership in bringing forward probably one of our first initiatives in this council that has to do with a tangible way to reduce gun violence and to do something about gun safety in our community. As you all know, we signed a resolution, or we approved a resolution just a couple of weeks ago that really set City Council on a path toward doing what we can to reduce gun violence and make people safer in our community. I'm the chairwoman of the City Council's Public Safety Committee, so I'm very glad to see this initiative come forward. I am also the chairwoman of the Community Health and Equity Committee, and I truly do see the gun violence epidemic as an issue of a public health crisis happening here and throughout our country. Residents have also told me that since El Paso, things feel different, that a shooting that targeted Latinos feels more personal in this city that is so close to the border ourselves, in a city that also welcomes and assists migrants in their search for asylum. It's more personal and more frightening, they tell me. One of our local parishes saw their congregation shrink by half at the Spanish language Mass the Sunday after the El Paso shooting. There were families who were too afraid to send their children to school, and right now, at a time when we're just starting the school year, that's a terrible way to begin the school year. So the impact of gun violence, like my colleagues have said, stretches far and wide, and I'm glad that the city of San Antonio has stepped up and not accepted the status quo. Para nuestros televidentes en español, les voy a decir que desde que ocurrió lo del Paso, me han dicho muchos residentes que esta vez se siente distinto lo que está aconteciendo con la violencia de armas. En una iglesia aquí cerca del centro de San Antonio, la mitad de los congregantes no asistieron a la misa el domingo después de lo que ocurrió en El Paso, de la misa de español. No se sentían seguros participando en practicar su propia religión, que también es algo que protege la Constitución y las enmiendas a esa Constitución. Y por eso es que tenemos que hacer algo, y por eso me da mucho orgullo apoyar a mis colegas del concilio con esta propuesta. And it's fortunate that we're also at Council making progress on domestic and family violence. It's a priority. And as more researchers dig, we find that it's evident that men who end up on rampant shootings usually have a history of domestic violence in their background. In fact, a review of over half the mass shootings between 2009 and 2017 were committed by someone who had also murdered a family member or an intimate partner. Firearms do not belong in a home where there is family violence. And I support the saying that says, if women are not safe, then none of us are safe. And finally, I want to repeat my invitation to gun owners and gun vendors to get involved in this conversation. We need your collaboration and your insight if we're going to make true strides in protecting our community. I want to thank my colleagues again for allowing me to participate in this event, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. At this time, I think we're going to hear from some people from Move On, Texas. They're going to be coming up and telling us some of their concerns about this issue.
Good morning. My name is Raven Douglas, and I'm the Deputy Director of Move Texas. a grassroots, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization building power in youth communities across the state. Young people across the country are leading on gun prevention, and we are here today because our lives are on the line. While mass shootings gain the headlines and instill fear in so many, the fear of gun violence exists in communities of color every single day. There are numerous reasons for increased gun violence in these communities. Lack of basic economic opportunity, polluted air and water, underfunded schools, no affordable health care, just to name a few. However, at the core of this crisis is how easily, with little oversight or regulation, bad actors can access a gun. While young people across Texas wait for the governor and the Texas legislators to take meaningful action on gun violence in our state, this initiative by the City of San Antonio is a first step in getting firearms off the streets. On behalf of Move Texas, I'm looking forward to working with Councilwoman Andrew Sullivan, Councilman Courage, Councilwoman Sandoval, and the City Council on protecting our schools, neighborhoods, and young people from gun violence through this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, and now I believe we're available to take questions.
Councilman, can you give me one specific example where a gun buyback program has reduced violence in the city that has been going on since 1974? Do you have a guide, like a marker to follow?
Well, I believe the best marker I've found in doing research is the City of Los Angeles. They have consistently, year after year, sponsored gun buyback programs, which they believe are very successful. You know, this isn't necessarily saying we're trying to end crime. It may not people who are mentally ill, who are getting a gun and shooting up a community. Maybe it's not mass murder, maybe they're just holding out in their house and shooting at police officers who are coming out there. Or maybe it's people who are committing domestic violence. We know we have a severe domestic violence problem in this city, and guns are the main weapon that many women have been killed. And I think, you know, Councilman Andrew Sullivan would probably want to add a little bit more to that. She's had more of an experience in that.
When it comes to domestic violence, one of the things that I learned firsthand was when you go through the situation and you're in a position where you fight back, but at the end of that fight, this person sleeps at the door with a gun sitting in his lap, only to use the same gun to take yourself and your youngest son at gunpoint, and then take that same weapon that you know has a featherweight trigger. The miracle that I'm standing here today is what is proof that we have to do something, because as soon as he turned the gun on himself, it was over. If that gun hadn't have been available, we probably would have still just been fighting. But because weapons were readily available, it was easier for him to act upon the thoughts that he had. I can't say that each and every last one of these guns that are turned in can take crime completely off the street, but I know when it's not available, it can do the most to save a life that can continue to tell a story of how we can overcome such a violent situation that we've been in.
Councilwoman, what are the specifics of the program? What money will be used to buy these back? How much are we going to spend? Give me some of those specifics.
So we're looking at the asset forfeiture. We know right now that is one of the programs that has not been truly tapped into with the San Antonio Police Department. We're looking to ask for 20% to start doing the most that we can, depending on the caliber of weapon it is, depending on if it's in a good shape or if it's in broken condition, then that will determine exactly what amount we will give as a contribution to the donation given back for the buyback program. Again, once we have these weapons, what we're looking to do as well is to truly melt them down and create a sculpture that we can dedicate to those that we've lost.
And what would stop someone from using the money that they get from the buyback to just go out and buy another gun?
We're hoping that within themselves, they will see a need to do something more for the community, to find a child that they can do something for, to be a positive role model, to say, I voluntarily did this so that I can show a tone and set the example that we as a community can truly do something better when we work together.
So
One of the things, let me elaborate on that. One of the things that other cities have done is they've not given cash, but they've given gift cards. And that's something that we can explore, especially giving a gift card to a business that does not sell guns or things of that nature, so that then that's used for personal purposes to sustain their family more than to go out and purchase another gun. But even if somebody were to get some kind of reward from the city for turning in a gun and they go buy a gun, the gun they turned in is never going to hurt anybody.
So what's the process now? Does it have to go through the regular CCR process of going through governance and get council approval? So what are the next steps?
So you are correct. We have to take the procedures that follow the CCR, and it does have to go in front of governance. So we're still in the process. This is just the first steps. The first steps was getting it typed up, doing the research, finding out exactly what we as a city and a city council can truly do within the legal law that we have, and then making sure that it continues to go forward, and now we follow the trail.
Taking that into consideration, how quick do you think it could be rolled out where people will show up and want to sell their weapon, and where would they do that?
So it will take a couple of months because, as we know, it goes through the proper channels of process. But we have asked Chief McManus if the San Antonio Police Department will be the main source of where they turn those weapons in. And then at that time, we will go through the process of how they actually destroy the weapons once they retrieve them.
Yeah, you know, you've got to think of...
anonymity when people show up? I
Yes.
mean, some people may be leery about turning over a weapon that
It is,
could be questioned.
it is anonymous.
It is
We don't want anyone to fear that there'll be any kind of repercussion. We don't want people speaking out against them because they're turning in a gun, or speaking out against them because they say they may be a criminal. It is anonymous. We want to protect the people's rights to privacy, but at the same time, we want to get those guns off the street.
Have you spoken with police? Do they support this idea?
I've spoken with the chief just this morning, and he and I and the councilwoman are going to be meeting and discussing this. It's been very successful in LA. It was successful in Boston. It's been successful in several cities in New Jersey, but it's also been unsuccessful in some cities. But most of the research that we've looked at that talks about whether it's questionable was done back in the late 1990s or the very early 2000s. I read, 2002 reports. We're talking about 19, excuse me, and we're talking about all of the terrible things that have been occurring since 2002, 17 years worth of increased mass murders, more veterans killing themselves, more children being injured. So it's time to take a fresh look and have a good, strong, powerful program that we can move forward in the city, and that's what we need to develop. So to say it's going to be implemented in a month or two, we need to really develop the kind of processes and programs that will be most effective for San Antonio.
You didn't answer the question of whether or not the chief supports it or not.
Well, I
He
think
said
that's
he hasn't had one since he's been here in 13
right.
years.
You can ask the chief, but he and I said we're going to talk about this and see what we can do to work together.
You have to look at the manpower that goes behind actually taking someone that can actually step in and do this for us through SAPD. So he's very open to it, but it's putting the steps in motion of how can we fully make this come into fruition.
Councilwoman, I know you talked that you guys would melt the guns. Has there been any talk about selling them or maybe trying to see if they match with any open cases?
So what Chief McManus did tell me is that they do not sell back any of the guns that they retrieve, confiscate, or will get off through the buyback program. They will not go back on the street.
They do examine them to see if they may be related to any crime that's committed anywhere. They look at serial numbers, and that's the most practical way of doing it. They don't necessarily do a bullet test on every weapon. But if they can identify a weapon they think may have been involved in a crime, then that's held so that it can be used in that investigation. But mostly, they'll simply be destroyed, and then hopefully we can, as Councilwoman suggested, putting them into some kind of memorial on gun violence and domestic violence and things of that nature.
But if they do match with a case and they're being turned in anonymously, how would that work?
Well, at least you've got that gun, and there's a lot of ways of tracing that gun. But you know what? We want to get that gun off the street, and if it were never turned in, the police would still have to figure out a way to solve that case.
So you had said,
San Antonio ever try to be part of a program like this one?
The San Antonio Housing Authority did a somewhat similar situation about 10 years ago. Federal government, HUD, gave them some money to do a gun buyback program in public housing, which they did. I don't know the numbers of how many guns they collected, but that's the first and only one
Right,
that I
I
know
believe
of.
they collected over 400 guns during that initiative. And so they found it to be very successful. People were willing and able to step up voluntarily to do so. It wasn't something that was mandated or mandatory for them to even continue their housing, but they were able to at least have those 400, I believe 430 or more off of the properties.
You said
How would it work out
20%.
for stolen guns, like a gun owner wanting his gun back, if you recover something like that?
Well, I think that's part of the process that we need to examine as we put this together. If we can identify a gun and there is a gun owner who has reported that gun, who said this was the serial number, and we recover that, I would presume we would return that to the rightful owner. This has nothing to do with keeping guns away from people who have the right and the authority to own a gun. It's not a Second Amendment issue, it's an issue of public safety.
This sounds like it could end up being pretty complex. How confident do y'all feel that this will be successful?
Very confident. For me, it's always making sure that we take the first steps. Anything that is new will always have ways of making sure that we make it prosperous for others. We cannot say that it's going to be easy. Nothing in life that you do to make a difference is ever going to be easy. Is it worth it? Definitely. Going through the steps and making sure that our children are properly cared for and letting our communities know that we're here to take those difficult steps is what we've been elected to do.
One other way of making sure this is acceptable and successful is to get the support of the entire community. This is a city initiative, but I think we're going to be reaching out and welcoming county support from the county sheriff's department, but also I think we should be reaching out to every school district, every church, every part of this community and ask them to become part of this process, to talk to their students and their teachers, to talk to their church members, to go ahead and talk to business people who employ hundreds or thousands of employees so that we can educate people. This is more than just a gun buyback. It's also an educational program to get people to think about, do I really need that gun in my house? Do I know somebody else that may have a gun that they're trying to figure out how do I get rid of? You know, it's a collaborative effort for this community, and I think that's what'll make it successful.
You mentioned using 20% of asset forfeiture funds. Do y'all have a ballpark of how much that is right now?
Not at the present moment. When we sit down with Chief, we will go through all of the steps that are needed to make sure that this is something that can be done right. We don't want to just rush into it, but we want to make sure that it's not only about just getting the guns back, but making sure that the people that turn in these weapons understand that we appreciate them taking the step forward and making sure that our community knows that we are doing everything within the rights of the city to ensure that our communities are very well cared for.
Mm-hmm.
Any idea how many weapons were reported stolen last year, or how many stolen weapons were recovered?
You know, I just asked the chief to get us that report, and we haven't received it yet. But I will say that last year, the police department, as you heard, had confiscated about 750 or 60 weapons from criminal activity. We would love to match that. We would love to exceed that. Several cities have collected 1,200, 1,300, 1,700 guns in their buyback programs. Admittedly, like a city like Los Angeles is much bigger, and so that's why they do it year in and year out. And this doesn't necessarily happen to be a one-time process for us. This could be something that this city continues to participate in over the years, always striving to remove more and more guns from use by criminals or people who have problems and are going to harm or hurt other people or themselves. So it could be a very ongoing process.
So you have 5 council members signed on to this. You only need one more to make it go through. What have you heard from other council members, and what have you heard from the mayor?
So other council members are very supportive of this. And the mayor is also, he's looking to find a way that we as a city council can do everything that we can within the city council rights and limits that we have. As a city council, we are limited because guns are federally regulated. But if we can take one step forward, then what we're looking to do are truly make those strides. Now, we can't say that we're going to get it right all the time, but this is something that when you say that you have to do something that you've never done before to do something that's never been done before. is what we're truly looking to do as a city and as a city council. We have Judge Rosie Gonzalez here as well. And having that collaboration between city and county, I would love for her to speak about some of the things that she has also seen in her court when it comes to gun violence, when it comes to domestic violence, to give another perspective of why this is so important on not just a city level, but a community level as well.
Thank you,
you,
Judge.
Councilman. You know, you've heard it. You guys have reported it, ladies as well. We have epidemic numbers of domestic violence in Bexar County. We have record-setting numbers of drug cases. Guns are inherently linked to that violence. Someone asked about the cost. Someone asked about the success rate. As the councilwoman and the councilman said, anything that brings community together to make our community safer is already a success. So they're well on their way to making this a successful endeavor. I foresee them doing this maybe 2 or 3 times a year, at times when we know people are at most risk, when people get depressed, when people lash out at family members, maybe during the holidays, maybe during Fiesta, maybe 4th of July, when people get together and emotions kind of get elevated for a number of reasons, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's familial issues, whether it's domestic issues. So I look forward, as well as everyone down at the courthouse, everyone on this newly founded commission, to find ways to reduce domestic violence that's being spearheaded by Judge Monique Diaz and Judge Sakai. So I know and I feel comfortable saying on their behalf that we're in this. We're in this with the city. This is not a city-county issue. This is a community issue. Everyone within the boundaries of Bexar County is involved. And if we don't put a stop to this now, we're going to lose generations of youth to this type of violence, whether it's at the hands of themselves using a gun that was left discarded, unattended for this child to use, or whether, as you see in my court, I am looking at the adults who had adverse childhood experiences. I am dealing with the adults that are hurt, that are damaged, that need intervention. And we can stop by taking those weapons and increasing the safety within those family units. When we have healthy families, we have safer communities. So once again, thank you to City Council for stepping up at this time when it's most needed.
Thank you, Judge. Any other questions?
You said you were meeting with the chief again. Is that happening today?
No, but he and I have talked. We may be meeting today or tomorrow. You know, we have a very, very busy schedule this week and next week working on the budget. All of us have committee meetings. We have budget meetings. Sometimes it's hard to find 15 or 30 minutes to really sit down and talk about this with all of our schedules. But it's going to happen. And as far as if we've got a majority support on the council, we'll have to wait and see. We've got 5 council people who have stepped up. But you know, one thing that we can't do is go around and counting heads with all our council people. That's in violation of state laws on a walking quorum. So we know we've got 5 who are interested in pursuing this. And whether it's going to be completed will depend on the research we do, the processes we put in place, the steps that we go through, the funding source, and that everybody on the council will be knowledgeable about this information, and then we'll make a decision. But I suspect that the people in this community need this kind of activity to protect them, and I think you're going to find that the council people recognize that. Any others? Well, we'll be here if you want to talk with either of us individually or anyone else who's spoken today. We really appreciate you coming out. We hope you'll spread the message. I think we're welcoming any community input because we know this is a community problem and it's a community effort to solve it.
Thank you.
Thank you.